Good morning. Thank you for joining us on our third webinar of International Education Week 2018. This morning we're going to be concentrating on graduate study for the United States. So bear with me as we switch over to the PowerPoint. So graduate study in the United States refers to master's and PhD level studies. So if you are interested in master's and PhD level studies, then you're in the right place. By way of introduction, my name is Claire Powell. I'm the Education USA Advisor currently present in Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm based at the US Consulate General in Johannesburg. And I manage the Education USA program here for Johannesburg, as well as our embassy in Pretoria. Essentially, Education USA is a program that is supported by the US Department of State and was set up in some sort of capacity. Student educational advising has been part of the US State Department since the 1920s, but is officially as Education USA since the late 90s. Our main aim is to help international students navigate the process of applying to US higher education institutes and to help give them accurate, comprehensive, and current information. We have hundreds of centers, over 400 all around the world in close to, I think, over 175 countries now, and 3 of which are situated right here in South Africa. So as I said, myself for the Johannesburg and Pretoria jurisdictions of South Africa, which include Gauteng, Northwest, Free State, Mpumalanga, and Limpopo. And then we have our advisor, Alice Kim, based in Cape Town, and she is responsible for the Northern, Western, and Eastern Capes. And then our part-time advisor, Susan Knowles, based at our consulate in Durban, is responsible for KZN. So depending on which province you hail from, now you would know the appropriate advisor to contact. So some statistics that were released yesterday about students, South African students and international students in general that are studying in the United States. So we saw a slight, about 1.5% increase in overall international students studying in the United States, which is a good thing considering the recent climate. And we're very happy to see that there has been an increase. So just bordering almost at about a 1.1 million international students studying in the US. We have seen some increases from sub-Saharan Africa, which makes us very, very happy. So we went from about 37,000 to just shy of 39,500 students from sub-Saharan Africa studying in the United States. And then South Africa itself saw about a 6.8% increase in students studying in the United States. So from about just over 1,900 students to just over 2,000 students. We're very happy to have broken the 2,000 mark, which is the first time in quite a while, almost a decade, I would say. So just over 2,000 students from South Africa studying in the United States. Although we've seen a positive increase, we have seen our place in sub-Saharan Africa go down, with Ethiopia seeing a tremendous increase in students. So they now occupy number 4 spot, with Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana ahead of them, occupying spots 1 through 3, and South Africa in 5th place with just over 2,000. So as you can see, there's increases across the board of students going to the United States, and it makes for quite a global and interactive world, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So why the United States? Some of the reasons that you as a student and looking at your, furthering your tertiary education, what are some things to kind of help you decide, or maybe these are reasons that you've already thought about. So studying in the United States, the quality, the facilities, faculty, and resources are arguably considered the best in the world. The choice and flexibility, I think, is one of the hallmarks of the US higher education system, and especially at a graduate level. You can also see this in the fact that what you've done your undergraduate in doesn't necessarily restrict you from what you want to further your education from a master's or a PhD level. And I think that is owed to the fact that in most cases, they feel like you've had exposure, definitely in the US, if you've done your undergrad in the US, you've had exposure to multiple areas of study or different fields. So it doesn't preclude you, especially if you've got life experience in another field, from furthering and doing a more advanced degree in another field of study. So let's say you did economics for your undergraduate degree. It doesn't stop you from doing international politics as a master's, for instance. So I think that's a very, very amazing thing. So the chance to become a globally competent citizen. So yes, in most cases, especially with campuses becoming more diverse, your exposure to not only American students, but students from all around the world allows you to become a more globally competent citizen and being able to interact with different cultures. I do think we do that pretty well here in South Africa, given our melting pot rainbow nation. But I think it's also to understand other parts of the world allows you to become, as I say, globally competent and more valuable for professional goals thereafter. International students are highly valued on US campuses. So just going back to what I noted before, having US institutions be diverse in their programming. If they're going to say that they represent a global perspective from around the world, of course, they're going to want students from a variety of regions or countries around the world to have that representation in their classes and on their campuses. So, just for you to know that international students are highly valued on US campuses. So some structure and understanding of what US higher education entails. There is no central government authority that manages HEIs in the US. So accreditation is a voluntary thing. Universities run themselves much like their own business. They don't have a Department of Higher Education and Training like we do here in South Africa. So with accreditation being regional, not regional, voluntary, it can kind of create issues, and this is where issues of diploma mills can come in. At a graduate level in the United States, there's just shy of 1,400 institutions in the United States, so your choice is quite abundant, and these are just the accredited institutions, and they're accredited on a regional and national basis. The best way, I would say, for you to go and have a look at whether an institution is accredited or not is to follow to a website called that's held by the Council of Higher Education Accreditation, or CHEA.org, so CHEA.org. You can put the name of a program or an institution into a search database, and it will come up and let you know whether or not it's accredited. And why can accreditation be very important to, say, a South African? When you return home, you may need to have your degree evaluated by the South African Qualification Authority. And if the institution that you've received your degree from is not listed with the likes of, the Council for Higher Education Accreditation or with the Department of Education, then what you run the risk of is not having your degree recognized, which could cost you your employment or your future. On another factor, especially at a graduate level, rankings, we don't have official rankings. And with Education USA, because of the kind of magnitude in terms of the number of institutions there are, it's just something that is not in the ethos of the US higher education system. The big thing in what Education USA pushes, and many of the other universities will tell you, is to choose a university, or especially at a master's and a PhD level, a program that is right for you, that's going to be the right fit. You don't force your foot into a shoe that is too small and end up getting blisters. You want those shoes to walk with you the whole way so that you reach your end goal. So Very much the same with the university. You want to be happy in that case. Yes, you might be only doing a 1-year master's, but in some cases with the PhD, you would be there for 5 years. So you really want to make sure that it meets, of course, your academic and professional goals being one criteria, your personal goals being the second criteria, and then I always bring in the third one being make sure it meets your financial needs. So academic, personal, and financial needs priorities are very, very important to match the program. There aren't any like national entrance exams in order to get into a program. This applies more from a high school into undergraduate level, but the same applies for master's and PhD program. A creative writing program at Columbia or a creative writing program, at Berkeley, they're going to have different admission requirements, and admission requirements are going to vary by institutions. Some might want 2 recommendation letters, others might want only 1. One might want, examples of previous papers that you've done, or have you done publications, an abstract of proposed, research. There can be a number of things that can vary between universities, even standardized testing and their requirements within that. And we'll get to standardized testing, but to understand that not one university is like the other, and admission requirements can vary from institution to institution. And that's why, hence, this presentation is concentrating on the needs of you to research early on before actually putting an application in. So following on a little bit more, researching your options is very important. For you to make sure that you are researching your options. Basically, that you are making sure that you're making the right choice and finding the right program that's going to be the right fit for you. Defining your priorities is a big part of that. So on those 3 criteria that I spoke of, what are your academic professional goals? What are your personal wants of a university in the surrounding area? And then what are your financial needs and priorities? That will help you narrow your choices and prepare for standardized testing. And this process should begin anywhere from 24 months prior to your study to about at very latest 12 months before you walk onto campus. And just remember that US academic year runs completely opposite to what we have here in South Africa. So in most cases, what will be happening is that you'll begin your studies in the August or the September period and go through from the end of your academic year to the May or the June period. Okay, which means, let's say, for instance, you're putting an application in now. This would be only for you to begin your studies in August or September of 2019. Okay. And then once you've understood your choices, you understand if you need to prepare for any standardized tests. Okay. So diving a little bit more into the researching your options, is US study for you? Some questions to ask yourself. What are your goals? Okay. Why do you want to study in the United States? Is it because something that is the subject matter that you're studying not available here in South Africa, or the exposure to thought leaders or research not available and you want to be exposed to that? Do you need financial assistance that you feel, you need to if you do need financial assistance, you do need to think about, okay, is South Africa more appropriate for me, or, could I get some good funding from the United States? Which universities will meet your needs on those 3 criteria that I spoke about previously? And then what are the application and financial aid deadlines, so that you understand your timeline and what you need to do. And we'll speak about a timeline a little bit later in the presentation. And then once you've narrowed your choices, which standardized tests do I have to take? Do I have to take a GRE? Do I have to take, an English language test? Something of that nature. And I'll explain acronyms as we go. But of course, understanding what your goals are and what your needs are fine, but you also have to make sure that you have the necessary preparation. So will you have completed a bachelor's, a 4-year degree? So that can either be a 3-year bachelor's with honors, or let's say you've done a B.Ed or a B.Tech that's already a 4-year degree, in order to do a master's, because all bachelor's degrees in the United States are 4 years. So they require you to have a 4-year degree. And then if you're looking to do a PhD, Potentially, you might need a master's. There are some that will take you right out of your bachelor's, but in more cases than not, do you have a master's in order to qualify for a PhD? I say do your marks average at least to 60%. And the reason why we say that is because, especially if you are looking to fund your studies, so whether that be through outright scholarships or fellowships or assistantships, you want to make sure that you are academically strong in order to qualify and be eligible for that. And of course, again, one of the hallmarks of the United States is that they don't just look at the quantitative data, the marks that you are getting. They are going to look to what else you are doing. What else can you give? What is your X factor that you bring to the table? So in some cases, they might want to see what your extracurricular activities are. Are you giving back to the community? Are you active? Just to see how involved maybe you will be when you join their program. Of course, we're not necessarily all on the academic front, so not necessarily on the sports for a master's or a PhD, but for arts, so fine arts or performing arts, do you have the necessary demonstrated talent? So will you have to do, let's say, how do I call it? An audition or put together a portfolio or something of that nature to show the universities, okay, yeah, here's my talent. Let them be the judge and then see if they will admit to you. Of course, some graduate programs are going to ask for work experience. Traditionally, MBAs like students, their prospective students, to have some work experience, but then there are some that's not necessarily important, but understanding your programs and what they want from candidates is very important. Some public health degrees, many of them might want to see kind of what experience you have with regards to the field of study you might want to go into or study. So this next slide is just kind of a visual diagram of basically deciding what are your priorities. So as a little bit more branched out than what I spoke about before in terms of program, cost, and personal goals. But you really need to ask yourself on each of these criteria, what is most important to you? Okay. So degree types in the United States. At a graduate level, there's a master's degree. Generally, master's degrees take 1 to 3 years to complete beyond a bachelor's degree. They can be in a specialized branch or field, academic or professional, in like the case of an MBA or an LLM. Thesis or non-thesis options are available. And this will go for doctoral programs as well. When you're looking at the program, look at the structure. What are they looking for from you? Who are the professors or the researchers that you're going to be working with? Because you also want to see, does this program have more of a practical hands-on element to it, or is it very much more theory? I think that can also help you determine if a program is right for you or not. Doctoral degrees, as you can see, these are really aimed at someone who's looking at more of an academia or looking at academia aspirations. So doctoral degrees in the United States can take 5 to 8 years beyond a bachelor's degree. And why we say beyond a bachelor's degree is that there are some programs that will accept you right out of your bachelor's degree. Generally, when it comes to PhDs in the United States, that your first 2 years will be heavily based in coursework, funny enough, which is very opposite to what we have here in South Africa, but they will be based in coursework. And then often you'll have to do some sort of defense, an oral defense of your research or your proposal. And if you're successful in that defense, then you'll be allowed to continue on with your doctoral degree, or you may come out with a master's degree. And if you've already got a master's, that would be a second master's. So that's just important to know. So it can be academic or professional. Generally a comprehensive exam, especially when it comes to board type exams and dissertations. Okay. Or dissertations. So step 2 in our 5 steps to US study process, I forgot to mention that before, is financing your studies. You want to understand the financial part before you actually put an application in, and really you should be doing this about 12 to 6 months before attending or stepping foot on campus. So understanding your budget, what do you have to work with? Are there ways of reducing your costs in the United States? Let's say looking at the Midwestern or Southern universities, a little bit more because cost of living is significantly cheaper. Or, are there ways for me to get assistantships, so on and so forth. There's, various factors to it. And then understanding, once you've got your budget, are there ways to reduce your costs, and then how much an institution actually costs. You can start working, okay, can I actually afford this university, or does this university allow me to apply for direct financial aid or scholarships? And that's very important to make sure that a university can meet your need on this. Does it have a history of giving to international students? Does it have a track record? Because you don't want to invest your time applying to a university that cannot meet this need. You'll be throwing away money basically applying and energy into a university that can't meet your needs. So it's important to understand that. Okay, so yes, our least favorite discussion, cost. So as an international student, and this is a bit hard when you're looking at websites as a graduate student, but it's a little bit more involved than just tuition and fees. You want to take into account, because you're going to need to prove this for basically your visa documentation and your immigration papers, that you can afford the total cost of attendance. So not just tuition and fees, but also your living costs, which can include room and board, or, your rent if you decide to live off campus, books and supplies, transportation and personal expenses, and even health insurance. So it's really important to be aware of this. So I would say at a minimum, you're probably looking at about $20,000 to $25,000 a year as your total cost of attendance at the minimum level. And then some programs like executive MBAs that travel to multiple parts of the world can be over $100,000 a year. So you've really got to take that into consideration, that broad range, and then also take into account, okay, does a university bring down those costs, or either through outright scholarships, so on and so forth, which we'll talk about as we go along now. What are the ways to mitigate those costs? So I think it's important to know that in most cases, where most of your financial aid is going to come directly from, is going to be from the institutions itself. So at a master's and a PhD level, generally what you would be looking at is assistantships, so working for the institution in either research, teaching, and I have seen some administrative assistantships. Generally what these would do is provide tuition and a living stipend to you, but it typically will require an interview and a good academic standing. So this goes back to what I said before in terms of your necessary preparation, that at a very minimum you want to have a 60% average, or what's equivalent to a B grade in the United States, in order to qualify for something like this. Because especially if you're going to be doing a teaching assistantship, you need to be of a good quality to be able to teach undergraduate students, or assist the professor in teaching undergraduate students. Another way to help with costs is fellowships. So government, institutions and organizations might offer you an outright fellowship. Let's say like an NRF or something, where basically you would conduct research for a degree, and generally this will help cover costs, admin, living, etc. It might only cover parts, but just to understand that. I think both assistantships and fellowships kind of would go into this next category of on-campus employment. So as a student on an F1 visa, you are entitled to work up to 20 hours a week when a school is in session. Generally, it has to be on-campus work, and that's why assistantships and fellowships do so well for students, because they meet that criteria. You can work up to 40 hours a week during breaks, when class or the academic year is not really in full session. Federal minimum wage in the United States is about $7.25, but I've seen a lot of universities pay quite a bit more than this. Some states pay more. Let's say, for instance, California, I think, pays up to $15 an hour. But if you're working on a federal minimum wage, then you look, and the 20 hours a week, you're looking at about $1,500 to $2,500 a year. And as you can see, this is not going to cover. So let's say you go work at a computer lab, or the bookshop, or something of that nature. This is not necessarily going to cover it's not going to cover tuition and living costs. This is really going to be maybe covering your personal expenses, part of your living costs. So if you want to go to the movies, or buy a laptop, or that for kind of recreation, and buy that your deodorant, your toiletries and stuff, this is what this amount would work for. Some other aspects to think about, and I would say the two columns that bookend the US government scholarships tend to be easier to approach once you have an acceptance letter and a tangible amount of money that you need covered. That's easier to approach, say, a home government or a private sponsor, and say, hey, this is how much they're giving me in scholarship or fellowship, but I'm still short, $5,000, let's say. So in terms of ministries, I've seen the National Arts Council help some graduate students with regards to their studies on an arts level. So that's something to approach them on, but also be realistic. I don't know that they have the means to cover everything, so try and break it into more sizable chunks. I've seen the Department of Agriculture help with some PhD level students. So that's important to know. And then with private sponsors, so corporations and organizations either in South Africa or United States, again, approaching them is easier once you have been accepted. I'm not going to say it's foolproof, but let's say the likes of the Laurie Dippenaar scholarship with First Rank Group. I think it actually should open in a few weeks, and I think it closes in February. But again, they want you to have a letter of acceptance so that you can put that forward, and that will help cover graduate study in the United States. And then, of course, here at the US mission in South Africa, our US government scholarships, we do have our Fulbright scholarship, which is aimed at master's and PhD level students. It should be opening in early December, and the applications will close around the third week in April. And this would be for students that are looking to begin their studies in, let's say, so if you're applying for the third week April 2019 date, this would be for you to begin your studies in August or September of 2020. So it's quite a long process. And this is open to all areas of study, barring anything that has a client interface because of liability issues. So clinical psychology or medical studies cannot be included in this, and MBAs cannot be included. But every other field of study, we've sent opera singers, we've sent anthropologists, we've sent mathematicians, we've sent engineers to the United States on the Fulbright scholarship. So if you're looking at, a master's and PhD in the United States, in any field barring the two that I mentioned, then I highly recommend that you aim for the Fulbright. You can always go to reach out to us to find out more information as to who to speak to about the Fulbright. I believe they will have information sessions in the early part of the year, about February and March. So do keep an eye out for that on our US Embassy social media, as well as our page. You can also visit the US Embassy website at za.usembassy.gov and go to the services tab. Okay. Types of institutions in the United States. What I would say also with regards to this is public or private, there is distinction there. So you have state, that is basically run and subsidized by state residents' taxpayer money, or privately owned and operated institutions. Public may offer lower tuition, and then private traditionally would offer more financial assistance. I would say the exception being especially is at a PhD level. I would say almost at a PhD level, it's important for you to look, because a lot of research and development money gets thrown at institutions. So sometimes a public institution could be even more affordable and a better fit for you than a private one, especially to cover full assistantships. On another front, are other types to be aware of in types of institutions. So ones that just focus on the sciences, so Institute of Technology, let's say like an MIT or a Georgia Tech, they tend to be traditionally they traditionally cater to STEM fields, or art institutions like CalArt or Juilliard or something of that nature that focus more on the arts, performing or fine arts. Some institutions have an ethos that are because they were founded by a certain religious group. So not that they ask you to necessarily practice that, but their ethos and their values may be very um, founded on different religious affiliations. So whether that be Baptist, Evangelical, Catholic, Jewish, Islamic, you name it, there's probably an institution in the United States with that. At a graduate level for all male, I wouldn't say that there might be one that would offer a couple programs. But there are a lot of all-female campuses that offer a number of graduate programs. So, if that's the type of environment that you would like to be, please, do keep a lookout. Definitely narrow your choices down. And, other characteristics in terms of the structure of their program and so on and so forth. It's important to look at selectivity and size of a program. Columbia's Masters in Creative Writing only takes 8 students out of those that apply each year. So also looking at the size of the program and what's available, because that really does affect the numbers. So percent of applicants accepted, can you get a kind of range of what their standardized test scores were to see if what you are getting on practice tests or eventually get on the real test doesn't line up. Kind of what does your past academic performance meet maybe their previous one. Some universities will have an outright like a PDF profile that they can provide you of the last incoming group. Size can also play into it. So small, medium, large. Traditionally with graduate programs, they tend to be on the smaller side. So, but the surrounding campus can be rather large. So, what kind of exposure to environment do you want? Do you want other international students on campus to be exposed to? That can really, what environment do you excel better in? And you can get a full range within that. Some other factors to consider, of course, location. So the western part of the country, Midwest, South, Northeast. The United States is a massive country filled with different climates, and even different like local cultures. So to be aware of that is important. Again, as I said, Midwest and South tends to be lower cost of living compared to the West and the Northeast. So that's something else to be mindful of. Settings, so urban environments, suburban, residential, or rural countryside, but also to check your generalizations of it in terms of, you might think Nashville, Tennessee is a lot more rural and country than it really is, where it's, quite a big city, much like to compare to Sandton or Johannesburg, So something to think about on that grounds. To check your generalizations, to actually go and look on Google Earth and, do a little online virtual tour or something. At the same token, like if you want to do agricultural studies, you might not necessarily go to Columbia to do that because it's sitting in the middle of New York City. So, it's just check your expectations, really, is what I'm trying to say. And don't knock anything until you've actually researched it properly. Especially if the thought leader that you want to work with is in a town that you probably would not have heard or thought of before. Housing, so on-campus or off-campus housing. Generally, graduate students tend to want to live off-campus in a shared apartment or house that is relatively close to campus, but a lot of campuses also do have on or limited on-campus housing for graduate students. So weigh your pros and cons, understand the costs that are involved, and then also understand, especially off-campus, understanding, rental agreements and so on and so forth. becomes important. Of course, activities, what are you going to be doing in your spare time? What is the surrounding areas or the town like? Can you still partake in your hobbies that you enjoy doing? Are you easily accessible to travel if you want to travel and see other parts of the country? All of these can really play into it, picking a program and whatnot. So all of these, researching and narrowing your choices, looking at scholarly journals to see which universities, which professors are doing work in the actual field that you want to have exposure to or to work in. So how do you research and narrow your choices? Well, what I would say is to go to search engines first. So the likes of, grad.petersons.com or, US News, basically research programs in your field of study, even just putting in a simple Google search. But a lot of these websites individually, like Petersons, will allow you to put different factors of what you want, like size, location, and I'll bring up a list of universities that match your interests, which will then allow you to go to the individual college and university websites, do some virtual tours, maybe engage with those departments at the schools, engage with the professors that are doing research in your area so that they know who you are. So when an application comes across their desk, they can be like, oh, yes, this guy loves South American tree frogs as much as I do. We do have some graduate institutes that do visit South Africa, so they might do like small tours, like MBA tour each year, or QS tours. So definitely Google, QS fairs and MBA tour to see when institutions would be coming out to South Africa. You can visit the advising center if you're a bit old school and want to go through doorstops of books, paging through and researching. So Cape Town has a very active, open to the public center in central Cape Town at the American Corner, Cape Town, in the Central Library there. Durban, you would need to make an appointment as well with the Johannesburg Center to make an appointment. But we do have American Corners around the country. So, as I said, Cape Town, we have one in Soweto, we have one in Western Aria, we have one in Pretoria, Mamelodi, Pietermaritzburg. We hope to be opening one in Port Elizabeth soon. So, those are all areas where you can go and they have a small selection of books that you can page through to help you with your research and even potentially your preparation for your exams. Preparing for standardized tests, as I said, this becomes quite important. So when you're looking at it from this factor, to understand that you might have to take an English language test, but what I would say is to speak to the graduate admissions and see if, because you come from a officially, quote unquote, English speaking country, and if you've done your undergraduate education in an English medium university, you could ask for a waiver. And I highly suggest you can ask for a waiver because it can reduce your costs significantly. The TOEFL and the IELTS are probably both over $200 each. So it's important to understand that. So Test of English is a foreign language and the International English Language Testing System. TOEFL is run by ETS, which is an American company, and IELTS is run by the British Council. So just to be understand, they're both widely used and available and accepted. Pearson Test of English is another test that some institutions use, but it's not as widely available. And then there's also a free test that you could look at taking. Some universities are taking it. It's called the Duolingo English test. So to have a look and research that. All registration for these exams and payment for them, barring Duolingo, are done online. So just to be aware of that, research, type in TOEFL, type in IELTS, to make sure. I'm going to hopefully put up a card within this video when we're done today that will put some links. I'll put some links in the description as well for the testing. Okay, but if you have any questions, please reach out to us. I'll give you the emails at the end, but also you can find more information on our website at za.usembassy.gov. Go to services and then to educational advising. Academic ability. This is probably going to be the more widely wanted one. And for most international students, the only two exams that they're really going to, or fields of study, what they're going to look at is the graduate record exam or the GRE. Or if you're looking more at a business focus, the GRE, or what's called a graduate management admission test, the GMAT. Both of these look at both your qualitative and your quantitative abilities. So they're going to be assessing how well your reading comprehension works, what your basic mathematics skills are like. Content is not too much of a concern when it comes to these exams. It's about taking multiple practice tests that are available free online, or buying a book, to allow you to, how do I say this, prepare for the exam, and get your mindset in the timing of it. Again, I'll put the registration and payment for these exams is done online, as well as indication of where the test centers are in South Africa. If you are looking specifically at medical school, or law school, or dental school, there are separate exams for that. But I would reach out to your advisor for more information about those less commonly asked for exams. Law, the LSAT would only be for a Juris Doctorate, not for a master's in law. So step 3. So you've done your research. You know what you need to do from an exam point of view, and you found programs that match. You know what you need from a financial side of things. Okay, now it's actually putting the application together to the universities that you've narrowed down. So understanding the different admission requirements for each institution. Make a matrix or Excel sheet that lists the universities and then the requirements in different columns as you go along. Gather your educational credentials, so your academic transcript or record of your grades through your undergraduate degree, or if you're doing a PhD, your undergrad and your master's, so they can see what your performance has been like. It may need to be evaluated by an independent company that can do an equivalent course-by-course comparison to make sure that you've met requirements in order to qualify for the degree, or qualify to take the next step. So you might be asked to have your transcripts evaluated by the likes of World Education Services or ECE, so just be aware of that. Your standardized testing. But my two personal favorite parts of the application, your recommendation letters and your statement of purpose or personal statement, depending on what they're going to ask of you. So your recommendation letters have to come from an academic or a professional source. They can't be from a friend or so on and so forth. Ideally, they would like to have academic references from professors and so on and so forth. For some MBAs, they may prefer half academic, half professional. But essentially, these are anecdotal writings about how you are as an individual, your potential for success, and basically indicating if you're a good fit. It's not about the professor. It shouldn't contain information necessarily about their accomplishments. It's about you. But it also isn't just like, yes, I know you were a student in my class and got this grade. It's a little bit more involved and detailed. Your statement of purpose is something that you do need to work on. Generally, this is going to be something that requires you to speak about what you want to do, why you want to study it, how you plan on studying it, and what you want to do in your field of study on completion of the degree. So again, what is your purpose? Some of them may ask you to do a little bit of more of a personal statement, so kind of a challenge you face in your life, how you've overcome that. But anytime you can direct it into you doing what you want to do, it's important. It's a lot more focused than an undergraduate personal statement would be. So again, you probably need to do multiple drafts of this, have 1 or 2 people read over it for grammar, and to make sure that it makes sense to someone who doesn't know you necessarily. so, it's a good thing to do. But join us tomorrow. We'll be doing a little bit more discussion on writing. Okay. Steps 4 and 5 of the steps to US study, I don't want to get too caught up on, but I do think it's important to understand where they fall in the process. You cannot apply for a student visa until you've been accepted into a program or an institution in the United States, because essentially once you've been accepted, they prepare basically a certificate of non-immigrant student status, or what's known as your service document, or something it's called your I-20. But basically this will allow you to go online, fill out your visa application, and schedule an appointment with the consular section, either in Cape Town, Durban, or Johannesburg. Basically will allow you to prepare and go for that. So something to keep in mind. Step 5, prepare for your departure. We talk about this in order for you to understand, to prepare to go gathering your materials and documents, departing for the United States and arriving on campus. So understanding kind of what happens from when you leave your door here in South Africa and arrive on campus. We hold a free program here at the US consulates called the pre-departure orientation, where we invite former and current students to talk about their experiences and what they went through, and kind of impart wisdom about the experience. But we talk about taxes, we talk about driver's licenses, we talk about travel, we talk about the laws, we talk about where to buy. What's the best place to buy sheets? Where can I buy my spices, that are much like home spices? I can do my cooking, all these different factors. And it's a free lunch or finger food so that you can intermingle and also make South African friends that might be going off to the same area of the country as you. Okay. So a little bit about an application timeline. I would say if you are looking to start your studies if you're only just beginning this process and you were hoping to study in August or September of 2019, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying I would feel that you're a bit late to the game. But to maybe look at this as you're starting to get your balls all into a row to begin your studies in rather of August or September of 2020. So between January and August, research your institution's admission requirements and deadlines. So between September and November, request transcripts and recommendations, write and rewrite your statements of purpose, register for and take required exams, engage with selected universities, so either the international admissions offices or the individual departments that you want to apply to, or faculties, as we call them here in South Africa. And then basically between December and February on the whole, that is when you would submit your applications for admission and or for financial aid. Some institutions, especially at a graduate level, may accept rolling admissions, at which time when they receive your application, they'll make a decision on it within the few weeks of receiving it, and or let you know whether or not they'll accept you for the next incoming intake. So something to keep aware of. There are some programs like MBAs that do multiple rounds of applications through the year, starting in the October, January, and maybe April period. So just to be aware of that and research kind of which rounds tend to be the best for an international student to apply. My personal opinion is rounds 1 and 2 and not the third one. Okay. Especially if you need financial aid. Generally, if you've done the traditional December through January application period, you will only receive your letters of acceptance and rejection in the March period or April, and you must respond to all, saying yes to the one that you want to go to, and thanks but no thanks if you've got into multiple ones to the others. Receive certificate of eligibility for non-immigrant student status, which will allow you to apply for your visa. Receive your visa in the June to August period. You cannot apply for a visa more than 4 months before your start date, which will be stated on your certificate or your I-20. Once you've done that, you can organize your last-minute finances, arrange your travel, housing, and medical insurance if you have not done so before this period already. Attend a pre-departure briefing, and if possible. But of course, depart and enjoy yourself. So what happens now? What I would suggest is that you reach out to your Durban and Cape Town advisor and let them know that you have watched this online session, and they would be able to give you a membership form. And once you've done that membership form and gone away and done your research, you can arrange for, and accepted you as a member, you can arrange for a one-on-one consultation. And you notice that I mentioned Cape Town and Durban, but I have not mentioned Johannesburg. And the reason is, as I will be leaving my post here at the US Consulate on the first week of December, and there will be a period of vacancy, which will not allow for individual consultations until a replacement is found. We will have staff members doing general sessions and still be able to maybe help you with some materials, but they will not be able to sit and do individual consultations. So please keep that in mind. Please look out for college fairs and visits. As I said, go and visit QS, look for QS fairs and MBA fairs and the dates that they will come. But also remember to keep a lookout on our social media for more information and visits. I'll give you all those handles as we go along. But a good place to start is our educationusa.state.gov website. You'll find information about advising centers there, old global webinars that we've done that haven't had such a South African focus like I've done today. Trying to think what else, upcoming events potentially, and just some free information to help you along. So social media, so I would find us on Facebook. So the global page is Education USA. If you want to go to our South African specific one to see our events, I would look at Education USA in SA. Instagram, we have a page up, so EdUSA in SA, and you can also check out our YouTube channels. So I put the official one is Education USA TV or Education USA YouTube channel, or alternatively, type in Education USA South Africa and you'll find our local page where this presentation will be located after today. And yeah, we don't have enough subscribers as yet to change our URL, but just type in Education USA South Africa and you'll see a light blue profile picture that has our Education USA star and lantern in it. Okay. So I'm going to open it up to questions. If you do have any questions, please type and let me know. I haven't seen any questions come through, but as you're watching this, if you feel like you have any more questions about what has been presented today, or if you want to get those membership forms that I spoke about, reach out to the advisors on each of these locations. For a handbook and a membership form, and we'll best help and answer your questions that you may have as part of that email as well. So on behalf of the US Mission here in South Africa and on behalf of Education USA South Africa, I want to say thank you for joining us today or this morning. I hope that you will join us a bit later for our Financing Your Studies presentation this afternoon at 3 p.m. And I hope that you enjoy your International Education Week. And if you are writing exams, good luck. And we hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.